Hey y'all. So, finally, on the 8th day of August, I'm getting around to recording my July wrap up. I've been out of town the last few days. My daughter is in college down in Georgia, and I flew with her down there so that she could get all of her stuff from my brother's house where she put it when the school went in shutdown in March. And then on my way back, I got stranded there because my flight got canceled. So, and while I was gone, my dog passed away here. So I'm behind on my wrap up. But it's not a real deadline, right? It's a booktube and it's mine, and it doesn't matter if I'm a little bit late. I was also thinking that in a lot of my videos, I feel like I'm really rushing through to talk about the books, and I think I'm just going for a more relaxed vibe today. So here it is. This is a tea I got from one of my Sips By boxes. I can't remember which one it is, but actually I think this one is from a book box, maybe, because I think it might be called Circe's Elixir. So I think because it was book themed, it was probably from one of the bookish boxes a while back. I also have my Sips By box from this month. I'll probably talk about in a different video. Okay, so what did I read in July? I wrote it down. It's hard to pick a favorite. There wasn't anything that I was just blown away by. And you know what? The stand isn't on here. I'm going to count the stand because even though I didn't finish it, I finished 380 pages of it, which is the length of a book. And it was a reread. So my plan is to go back to it, but if I count the ridiculous third that I read, then that's 11 books for July. Yay for me. All right, so the first book I read for July was Turning Point. I think I did a review. It was my review last month for Tea and a Book. I was given a copy of it for free from the publisher. The summer that two best friends spend apart figuring out who they are and missing each other a lot. So if I remember, I'll go back and put a card in for that one because I did review it. Middle grade, would recommend. The Bookish Life of Nina Hill by Abby Waxman. I really enjoyed it. It was, let me see, what was it about? It was about a woman who was awkward, and she's on a trivia team, and there's this rival trivia team led by a man who she doesn't like. And so we've got a little bit of the haters to lovers trope going on there. But her primary story plot is about the visitor she gets one day that tells her her father, who she thought was dead, has recently died and left her money. And she thought that she was the lonely only child of a bohemian hippie who always is gone. Her mom is a jet setter and is always traveling and wants her to be more adventurous, and has told her that her father died. And Nina finds out that her mom has been lying to her and that she has all these relatives now that she is getting to know. And that was probably in my top 3 for the month. So that's The Bookish Life of Nina Hill. The Deep. I read The Deep by River Solomon, which is a novella, I think, technically. It's pretty short. And it's about an aquatic species that evolved from the fetuses of pregnant women who jumped overboard on the ships of the enslaved on the cross-Atlantic slave trade. And the main character is the keeper of all the horrible historical memories of the species. And once a year, they all come together to remember together. And she is just re-traumatized over and over by these memories. And she decides that this is the last year that she's going to be the keeper of these memories, and she takes off. So the book is the few days that she is gone from being with her family. And it was based on a song, which is kind of cool. So I really enjoyed that book. There's some gender stuff in there, lots of race stuff, as you might imagine, some sexuality stuff. So I would recommend it, especially because it was short, and I think it's a book a story that I'll think about again and again. So certainly worth the read for that. I've read at least one other thing by River Solomon, although I can't think of what it is. I like their writing. One of the other books I read during July was Mexican Gothic. I reviewed that one, so I will card it up here if I remember. That one is about a young woman who lives in Mexico, in I think Mexico City, and she is tasked by her father to go find out if her cousin is okay. So her cousin got married a year ago and has stopped being very communicative with the family, but has recently started writing letters to her uncle, the main character's dad, saying, you know, I need help, somebody come help me, and saying lots of scary things are going on. And he sends his daughter, the cousin, to go find out what is going on. So that is outlandish. Obviously, it's like a book where people get trapped in a cave. I cannot relate to any of that because why would you go there? There's just no reason. But it was a good book. It was interesting. There's some history, of the town where she goes, where bad things have been happening sort of cyclically. And she's learning about what's going on in the town and about these deaths that have happened and trying to figure out if her cousin is a raging lunatic or abused or what is happening in this town, in this little country village outside of Mexico City. So I really liked it. The author is Sylvia Moreno Garcia. And it took me a chapter or two to get into it, if I'm remembering. The language flow didn't feel natural to me, so it took a little bit for me to get into it, but once I was in, I was in. So I really like that one, probably in my top 3 for July. Song Yet Sung by James McBride is the story of a runaway slave who wakes up after being shot in the head in a room with other runaways. And she gets everybody free through, violence, as you might imagine. And then everybody starts looking for her. She's what they call two-headed because she can see the future. And she sees the future of Black people as not being as hopeful as everyone imagines, because she sees us fighting who we are and our roots in history and being sucked into the promise of capitalism. She doesn't use those words, but those are the visions that she's having. So it was an interesting book and interesting to think of kind of what would our ancestors be proud of if they could see us now, and what would they maybe be not so proud of. So I enjoyed that book a lot. Station 11 by Emily St. John Michael was a reread for me. That is the story of a troupe of Shakespearean actors and orchestra traveling up and down the countryside, 15 years after the fall of civilization due to a viral outbreak. And the main plot, if there has to be one, is probably with the lead character who was 8 during the fall. And so now that she's part of this theater troupe, she's with the group and they're looking for a man and a woman who were part of the troupe before that they left behind a year ago to have a baby. And they go back to this town and it's been taken over by a man who calls himself the Prophet. And they're trying to find their friends. And there's also some reveals about who the Prophet is. And there's a backwards look to 15 years ago, which was before the fall, and kind of what was going on with the common characters. So there's 1 or 2 characters that kind of links everybody together. Not on purpose from his point, because he actually dies in the first scene of the book. But everybody's kind of linked to this one older Shakespearean actor who dies in the first chapter. So I liked it more, I think, the second time, comparatively. I really like books about pandemics and apocalypses, and kind of the aftermath of the fall of civilization. Even though, the general themes tend to be about how people are to each other, even when you're thinking about zombie apocalypses, you have to, fear the dead, but don't trust the living. And it's always an interesting thing to me to think about those kinds of things, particularly in light of our current pandemic. And, even in the face of a global pandemic, it's hard for us to kind of align with each other, particularly in the US, because our system is so set in capitalism. I will be very interested to see what happens in a few weeks as schools are opening, especially if we really need to take a step back and reclose everything. Curious about that. It's my therapy. I'm really curious about what will happen next. Let's see, The Vanishing Half. Okay, so I read The Vanishing Half and then gave both of my copies away through a giveaway. So my first giveaway in my little book too, which is so cute. Kay the Reader won it. The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett is a story, I did a review, I'll tag it, about 2 very light-skinned twins who grow up in a neighborhood or in a town that was founded on the idea of biracial people wanting to be lighter and lighter in order to be considered successful and good neighbors by white people. Through the course of the story, we hear about these 2 twins who ran off when they were 14 or 15 years old. And then one of them goes off to marry a black man and have a very dark daughter, and the other one passes over in that she marries a white man and starts to live the life of a white woman. So that's an interesting concept to me, particularly, race is a social construct and all of those things. It's really fortunate that the daughter that the white woman has was also white, because I could have gone a whole different way, genetically speaking. But it was good, and I sent that copy, and then I also had a copy. I bought an extra copy for no reason that I did the giveaway, and then Jess, who is a subscriber of mine on here, and a follower on other platforms, I offered her my extra copy. And she accepted, so I sent that out to her last week. Clap When You Land. Oh my gosh, speaking of friendships and siblings and relationships, Clap When You Land is about 2 girls who are about the same age, 15 or 16, I think. Maybe they're 16 or 17. And Elizabeth Acevedo in her afterword, talks a little bit about a flight that was going from New York City to Puerto Rico. Nope. New York City to the Dominican Republic and crashed. And how important that flight was to the people who were in DR and the people who were in New York City. And this story is about a crash that happens from a plane on its way to DR. And what's revealed is that one of the men who's on the plane and dies is leaving behind two daughters, one in New York City and one in the Dominican Republic, who don't know about each other. And it's a really interesting story about the girls finding out about each other and how they sort of refuse to forget the other exists. And I love stories of family and friends like that. So I really like that. It's written in verse, as I believe all of Elizabeth Acevedo's books are. So I read it in audiobook because it's just easier for me. That way I get really caught up in formatting and things like that. But I really enjoyed the book a lot. Tea. Two more. In the Midst of Winter by Isabel Allende. What was this book about? I remember. This book was about, how do I not give it away? I think I have to give away a little bit, but not more than what is in the summary. One day, two old people find themselves entangled in the mess of a young Latinx girl. So, I think Puerto Rican. There's an older woman who lives in the basement. She is a professor or instructor or something at a university. And she's renting the basement apartment from an older gentleman who lives above her. And white guy. But I think they teach classes in the international student department or something. And it's very snowy. They're in New York City or somewhere. And Richard, I believe, is the white dude's name. He hits the car in front of him, and this young girl is driving, and he throws his business card at her as she's trying to get away. And then she shows up at his house in the middle of the night, and she speaks primarily Spanish, and because the woman in his basement also speaks Spanish, he calls her a, hey, can you come help me? Because there's this distraught girl in my house and she's speaking Spanish, and holy crap, come help me, please. And I will just say that there's a dead body involved. And then I'll leave it to you to read the rest. Or to read the rest and then tell me what you think of the story. I liked it. Trying to remember how it ends. A little bit in a bow. So there's all of this sort of like potential tension happening because they're involved in like this like covert situation, and but then it kind of wraps up in a way that is fine for everyone, which was nice too. And I feel like most of the books that I read that have an older protagonist, you know, if they're in their 60s or 70s, things tend to wrap up or somebody dies. Like the main character dies and there's the passage of the character, but I enjoyed the book. I'm almost positive, I'm not totally sure, but it may have been translated into English. But I might be thinking of Mexican Gothic. No, that was definitely written in English. I'll have to look that up, but I think maybe it was written in Spanish and translated. And then the final book of July was Here Comes the Sun Technically, I cheated a little bit because I finished it the August 1st, but I'm prepared to lie to myself a little bit. Hopefully this doesn't look too different. I ran out of space on my phone. But Here Comes the Sun is about a Jamaican woman who basically becomes a madam in order to earn money to send her sister to school. And it's also about a lot of things that the folks native to the island do and have done in order to be successful and gain money, particularly as people, mostly white people, come to the island and start taking over for tourist purposes. And actually, the main guy who's doing that in this book is also native to Jamaica, but is a resort heir. So his family has been running a resort in Jamaica for generations, and he's sort of running it into the ground and trying to figure out ways to be successful. So it was a good book. I enjoyed it. So all in all, I guess I kind of, at least a little bit, and like I said, I read the first part of The Stand too. But DNF'd it and didn't read the other 2/3 of that book. There wasn't anything I just didn't like, but nothing stands out as like, oh, I loved that for July. The Bookish Life of Nina Hill, I liked a lot. And I put 2 other books of Abby Waxman's on hold to listen to in audio because I liked the writing in that book. I enjoyed Mexican Gothic. But I tend to like, it was a horror book, and I tend to like horror books, particularly kind of in the vein of that story. And if I had to pick 3 top, maybe Clap When You Land, and that may be a little bit of a bias because I just love Elizabeth Acevedo. So I really like Station 11 too. But I'll say my top 3 books of July were The Bookish Life of Nina Hill, the book Mexican Gothic by Sylvia Moreno Garcia, and Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo. If I had to pick, which obviously I don't have to, but I will anyway. All right, thanks for hanging out with me as I think about books. I'm not even going to pretend that my TBR cart is doing anything for me by way of picking my books for August. I'm hoping I can find someone to do a read along with me, a buddy read, and then we could talk about it on our booktubes together because I think that would be super fun. I have actually not put out the interest. I plan on sending, doing a tweet to see if anybody wants to do that. So if you want to do that, let me know. It doesn't have to be for August. It could be for October. But probably the next way I'm going, I'm currently reading 2 books. And then after that, probably The Brief History of the Dead, because that sounds really interesting. And or Middle Game by Shannon McGuire, which was supposed to be where I went next before the other 2 that I'm reading. Which are Sharks in the Time of Saviors and Mrs. Fletcher. So, I mean, really, we'll see, right? I can pick whatever I want to read. So, if you got recommendations for me, drop them in the comments. I'm always open to them. Bye. See you next time.